taking Brooke, Zach, and Matt back to campus.
I want to hear about your experiences in this campaign, but first I kind of want to hear about your sort of approach to politics and how you got involved in politics. So let me just run across here and start with you, Brooke.
Yeah. Well, so I graduated in 2015, and when I was on campus, I first got interested because I came in pre-med, actually, first of all. And
always the path to politics.
Yes, exactly. So I started volunteering in schools around here, teaching art, actually, and kind of got very interested in what was happening in Chicago and in politics here, but started doing research at the Harris.
You're from Philadelphia originally.
Yeah, and so started doing research with a professor at the Harris School, and did that for a while, and was kind of frustrated by the interesting research she was doing, but felt like it wasn't going anywhere or being translated or anything like that. So
don't worry, nobody will see this tape. So
yeah, amazing work, but was like, why isn't someone implementing this? And so I ended up interning in the mayor's office my senior year, and just kind of got hooked.
Which was an election year.
Yeah, it was an election year, and there was a lot going on. I was in the press office, which I didn't even know existed in a politician's office before I started, but was just totally fascinated by it, and kind of went from there. But it was
and then you went on, as Christine mentioned, you went on to work for Hillary Clinton in her presidential race.
Yeah, so like I said, just really got hooked on it, and so an opportunity came up in Brooklyn right after I graduated in 2015, and so I was there for about a year and a half.
How did you get that job? You said an opportunity came up.
It was pretty random. I didn't think I wanted to do a campaign. I thought I wanted to go to the Hill, but someone was looking for someone to basically pull the clips for everyone in Brooklyn every morning, so I had to get up at 5
Just at the campaign headquarters, not the whole borough, right?
Right, well, yeah. But so it was about 40 pages worth of clips every morning to put together and send around. But so I got that job.
What time did you have to get up?
At like 4:30 or 5. So, but it was great, and just sort of worked my way up a little bit from there. And that was, once you get that job, it feels like things kind of snowball off of each other. You do one, and then the next thing kind of comes up.
Yeah, like an addiction.
Yes.
Yeah. So and then how did you end up in Missouri?
So I kind of knew after that one that I was going to want to do another, but I stayed in New York for about a year and worked in city government there, and just kept my eye on races that I thought would be interesting, and just reached out to as many people as possible to see how I could get synced up with folks who were headed out for the midterms, and talked to the comms director for Claire McCaskill's race, and she was looking for someone to do the opposition stuff.
So you targeted that race as the one that you would be interested in?
There were a couple of those.
She's running for re-election.
Yeah, there were a couple of those top tier ones, and this cycle was hard because there weren't that many challenger races for Democrats, which I think would be really exciting in their own right, but it was more defending seats this time around. So yeah, that was one of the ones, and I've always thought Senator McCaskill is pretty amazing. So
now, Zach, we thought you were a student here, but apparently you were not. You were off in Ohio involving yourself in politics during that same period of time. But talk a little bit about your journey.
Well, there's a lot of IOP stamps along the way, so but definitely didn't come to college thinking that I mean, didn't grow up like I love politics or talking about it at the dinner table like I think a lot of people do. But came here, and the first political thing I ever did was actually going to see President Obama campaign for Pat Quinn in 2014. And that was just such an incredible experience of just kind of the, I don't know, just the...
Out here on the Midway, right?
No, it was somewhere, it was at Chicago State. Yeah. So, but that was just such a surreal experience, like actually, and it was kind of a big, like, you're in Chicago kind of moment, because, I mean, obviously presidents go to Ohio, but it was never a thing that I was involved in or kind of went to. I'd never seen a president talk before, and fell in love with it. And then heard about this fancy little institute that was on the corner of campus, and obviously became very involved and realized pretty quickly that there were a lot of cool things to do here. and ended up at the 2016 convention, Democratic convention, and
Through the IOP, is
through
that
the IOP, yeah, and it was just blown away by it all, and but still a student, so still kind of like focused on school and whatnot, and then I was studying abroad during the 16 election, and kind of. I mean, it was hard watching it all from being abroad, and interesting to say the least.
Depending on your perspective, didn't look any better here.
Fair enough. But after that happened, it was like, okay, I need to figure out what I'm going to do, and I'm not going to do consulting recruiting. I'm not going to do all that. Like, I want to do something in politics. So I wasn't sure, and like obviously had backups and whatnot, but set my sights on doing something in 2018. And obviously being from Ohio, you know, Ohio's traditionally a very swing state, and figured, hey, like being a current college student, like I could probably get a an organizing job or something on Sherrod's race, or there was a governor's race as well, so there are a lot of big races happening in Ohio. But I knew in the back of my head I didn't like my congressman, and it's
Congressman's Jim Jordan.
yeah, it's a fun guy. Look him up. But it was a very interesting district, and the Bill of the Duck was where I grew up, and just started looking for people that were going to run, and got in contact with the woman who had run before, and not fared very well, and ended up going back and meeting her the summer before my senior year, and she said she was running again, and that she wanted to do something, and there were not people lining up to run for that seat. There were a couple of people in the primary, but they're all kind of whatever. Yeah. But she said she was going to do it again, and she was the most likely kind of person to win it, since she had run twice before, but realized really quickly there was nothing there. She was a retired kindergarten teacher, didn't have any kind of apparatus, but she had a heart of gold, and it was someone that I believed in what she stood for. I thought she was a good person, and just started working for her for free, and was like, hey, what can I do to help? And it really snowballed, and then now I'm here.
But when you say it snowballed, you started off as a kind of all-purpose kind of.
Yeah, mostly comms, kind of revamping websites, starting to do press releases, and kind of social media and whatnot. And a lot of it I had to do from here, because I would go back on the weekends a couple times a month, but a lot of it, I mean, a lot of comms you can do remotely if you try hard. And the goal was always to recruit someone to come run the campaign, but apparently no one wants to work in an R+14 district.
Yeah.
So
you ended up running the campaign.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, some would say that being a retired kindergarten teacher is a great experience for going to Washington. So, Matthew, you were in the college Republicans here, so you had an interest in politics that goes back.
Absolutely. I've, oddly enough, known I wanted to be in politics as a consultant. Actually, my dream is to be a media consultant since I was in like 4th or 5th grade. So
That is odd.
Yeah, it's definitely abnormal. And got started in politics the way most people do, just showing up, volunteering.
Was your family political? Or?
No, absolutely not. But I just decided to go get involved in Congressman Lee Terry's re-election campaigns in Nebraska 2nd, and that led to interning and then managing a state legislative race, and then I did.
While you were in college, or?
Yes.
Doesn't anybody go to class around here?
And then I ended up as an associate at Hamilton Place Strategies, which is a great public affairs firm in Washington. And while I was there, I was doing some political consulting on the side back in Nebraska. And the Governor Ricketts campaign manager, who I had worked with a little bit tangentially on state legislative stuff, but had never worked directly for or really known very well, ended up reading a statement that I had written for someone the governor was appointing to the legislature. And she messaged me on Facebook and said, can we talk? And we had a call that night, and I was hired as governor's communications director.
And what were your duties in that campaign?
As in the governor's campaign? I was responsible for all aspects of communications, from interfacing with our digital team, managing our relationships with our media consultant, Heath Thompson, at Something Else Strategies. I was the principal spokesman for the campaign and doing the earned media, social media, and speech writing.
Now, did you have to answer questions about the Cubs as well?
No. We leave that to the
That's
governor.
his other
Yes.
role in life, is as a part owner, or with his family owning the
Yes,
Chicago
member of the board of the
Cubs.
Chicago Cubs, and
That's something Republicans and Democrats can agree on, right there.
absolutely.
But so tell me, you had vastly different experiences. Your experience was a happy one.
Yes.
You won by what you said, 20 points.
Almost 20 points, yes.
Yeah, but well, let's go in reverse order now. You, what did you learn on this campaign? How'd you broaden your understanding of politics in this campaign?
You know, coming in, I thought I had a pretty good idea about the big forces that are at play in a campaign. You know, your field strategy, your media strategy, earned media, and comms, digital. But what surprised me was that you know, it comes so much down to retail politicking and interpersonal relationships, and making sure that you have those strong relationships with candidates throughout the party structure and with the party leadership, and how much those things can really make or break a successful team effort statewide.
Mm-hmm. And as a communications person, how did that inform how you handle communications?
Well, certainly, you know, you just have to be very detail-oriented and very sensitive, and make sure that you're bringing everyone along, and making sure that there's full situational awareness and that everything is really coordinated. And sometimes it's hard because sometimes there's territoriality or things are siloed. But ultimately, you know, for the governor, who did not face a very competitive opponent, this was about bringing Republicans up and down the ballot along with him, and making sure that we had a successful year in Nebraska.
So Zach, yours was a tough race. Yes. First of all, tell me how you, as someone who was really new to campaigns, adjusted to ultimately running this campaign, and then about the sort of the weight of running a campaign that nobody thought you could win.
Yeah, well, I mean, in the what you learned part of it, the short answer is everything, right? Like building something from scratch, figuring out how to run call time, like little things like that I had not done before, and having to build out a finance team.
The candidate calling, asking for money,
right.
asking for support.
Right, and going, I mean, building a field program, right? Building a comms network, like all of that stuff. We learned drinking out of a fire hose, basically. I was really lucky to have some UChicago alums move out with me, and some current students came out and worked as well. And so we had a big team, and we were able to raise a good amount of money that was able to finance that operation. But learning how to build that thing, I mean, I learned everything. As far as the weight of a campaign people tell you can't win, you don't listen to them. You can't. And you need to be able to keep hope in your supporters, or they're not going to go knock doors for you. You know, so you always kind of feel you're conflicted a little bit, but I mean, we were making a lot of progress. We were lucky because we were in a very red district, but I mean, our opponent had his fair share of scandals. He had gaffes on national TV. Right, he is a face of the most obstructionist kind of wing of the Republican Party in the Freedom Caucus. And a lot of candidates raised a lot of money against those people. So it kind of gave hope that we could maybe take out some of those guys, right? Like look at Andrew Jantz in California. Look at like Randy Bryce, right? Like there was a bunch of these kind of weird like candidates that weren't supposed to be competitive in races that incumbents were forced to spend money that usually they shouldn't have to. So that was part of our pitch to donors as well. Like I would definitely make regular contact with donors where we were trying to get money and get investments from. And the pitch wasn't only like, hey, look at this race, we can win, but hey, we need to build something because this guy's dangerous, right? You're making that pitch, and it's helping in a state where there are huge races, like having Sherrod Brown up for re-election, an open governor's race. Making the case for donors to invest in that state was a big thing that we did too. So you got to leverage your strengths, and our strength was that we were running against Jim Jordan.
Yeah. If you had, you guys had much different experiences because you were working for an incumbent governor, and in a race that was probably well-resourced. You had the exact opposite experience, but I'm wondering if maybe that also created opportunity that you wouldn't have had, and Winston Churchill said after in 1946 he was defeated after leading Britain through the World War. He was defeated. His party was he was deposed, and his wife, Lady Clementine, said, "Well, this is a blessing in disguise," and he said, "Well, it's rather well disguised." So maybe this is one of those blessings in disguise that are rather well disguised. But I'm wondering if you had come into another kind of campaign, if you would have had the same opportunity to rise to the top.
Certainly not that fast. And just the utility that you have to, be making decisions of how to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars is a lot of pressure. But it was one that was incredible, and I had.
You probably would have preferred the pressures of how to spend millions of dollars.
It's true. It is true. But being able to come and take a fresh look at how we do things, right? Kind of how the party will tell me to do something, how campaigns next to us would do things. Like Ohio had races in all 16 of its congressional districts for the first time in a long time. So, I would look at how other campaigns would do something. I would look at how the local races were doing something. And we didn't structure anything just on a whim or kind of figuring out this. There were some things that we would do, okay, this is working, this isn't, we'll make changes. But it was very much looking at, okay, Ken Harbaugh, it does this and it's working, right? He does these coffee with constituents, and talking to their people too, and talking about like town halls in those red areas. No one will come. The only people that will come are your hard blue Democrats. No matter how hard you try, how much money you spend on crowd building, they will not come. So like learning that kind of stuff, you had to leverage the other campaigns that were there and learn from them, and we were lucky to do that. And but I think definitely being able to build something up off of what people had done, because I came in full time on the ground in June, so it wasn't like we had a full operation until I was there. So I hope that answers the question.
Oh yeah. Brooke, you mentioned that it was a year in which Democrats were defending. Claire McCaskill was a target from the start. What was that experience like? And just describe what your role was in that campaign.
Yeah. So, it was, I think a story was just written about how she was the top target of outside groups on the Republican side. So she definitely had a target on her back from the beginning. And Missouri is an interesting state. They had in 2016, you had all your statewide leaders were Democrats, and then you had this wave come through. So I learned a lot about the state, and that was really interesting. But yeah, I think my role in particular was focused more on our opponent. And so he was a fresh face to a lot of people. He was the Attorney General, but a lot of people didn't know him. And so it was interesting I learned a lot about kind of working with reporters to get stuff about him out there, but also learned a lot about what people would actually pay attention to and how to make things stick. And
what did you learn about that? What are the fundamental principles that you learned?
I think that a big takeaway is that sometimes no matter how many stories get written about someone, a fresh face is a fresh face, and sometimes people are just looking for something new. So that's something that I'll continue to think about and kind of wrestle with as we go forward, I think. But
Senator McCaskill was obviously not a fresh face. She'd been around Missouri politics for a long time. She took a lot of incoming.
Right. That was tough because you have, especially towards the end, we had some, you would have a new ad against her every day, it felt like. And so, yeah, there was a big flood against her. And so it's tough. How do you break through that? And I think a little bit to Matthew's point about coordinating everyone, thinking about, we worked really closely with the digital team, and I found myself learning some video editing skills and stuff like that, just about how you can work together to think of other ways to kind of just hit every channel possible. But that was interesting too.
I want to bring these guys in, but I want to, before I do, I want to ask you guys, and maybe this is more, maybe I'll tell you what I am going to ask you, and then you can think about it. But sort of where these experiences lead you. I know Matthew's now ensconced in one of the leading political consulting firms on the Republican side, led by Jeff Rowe, who was a fellow here last year. But just let's hold that. If you guys have questions, I want to hear them. Ronan, you are not a graduate, but you are a story in that you went off to the western suburbs. Here, your third year in the college, and you presumably volunteered at that time to work for Sean Casten, who ultimately got elected to Congress. What were you when you arrived, and what were you in the hierarchy of the campaign when you left?
So when I arrived, since I was an intern in the primary for actually one of his opponents, and they were looking for people who had done at least something campaign related before. So when I arrived, they actually did kind of hire me as a fellow, which essentially meant the person to whom all things that are not currently being taken care of will be directed. It was great. I got some kind of contact with a whole bunch of different sides of things. But eventually, as they started to aggressively build up their field program, they needed full-time organizers. And they needed full-time organizers who could stay on through the election on November 6th. And so they trained us for that, and I took the offer, which required me to take this quarter off.
Right, in the tradition of destroying people's academic careers in service of the commonweal, But so just a couple of seconds on that experience and what you ended up doing and what you learned.
Mm-hmm. So I think that I learned a lot about the value of relationship building with volunteers as a key tool towards having a real field program. I had as you described this as well, really not much contact with actual campaigns, and all of a sudden you're thrown into it, and you have to all of a sudden make a lot of things happen that seem hard to happen. And what I found was that by getting to know some of these volunteers and by having personal contact with them, you're able to really establish a rapport that allows them to be extraordinarily helpful. I mean, volunteers would not only be knocking doors and making phone calls, but in many cases ultimately would help run the office and run the campus training, which allows us to do much bigger things than you can do just alone. And so that was something that building relationships as the face of the campaign, which was kind of hard to see myself as that at first because I'm just like I don't know anything.
That's probably not good first line.
Well, right.
But also, you're a young guy from the west side of Manhattan.
Correct.
And now you're on in the western suburbs of Illinois.
Right. I'd call people with my 646 area code, and they would be alarmed. Like, who is this scammer?
Yeah.
So I am a scammer, but not yet.
More from you in a second. Questions from anyone here, or are you guys just here for the Thai food? Be honest about it. Are there people here who? Yes.
Hi.
Melissa.
You'd mentioned that when you started in your campaign, you had started for free. And I'm curious about, as each of you is planning in these entry-level roles, or maybe even leadership roles, to enter into a campaign, how the financial aspect of that looks, because not everyone can afford to work on a campaign for free. Mm-hmm. And what did your campaigns do for folks who could not afford to work for free, and how did they include them, or were they just turned away?
Well, I think for me, I mean, when you have no campaign operation, like there's no revenue streams, right? So if you can make the case for, hey, I can create these revenue streams for you, you pay for yourself. So if you're talking about, if you want to, if you're looking for a race to get on, and maybe there's not much there right now, like I only worked for free for probably like 2 months, and it was because I was a full-time student, and I could have asked for money up front and whatnot, but but usually, I mean, I would hit my own benchmarks, you know, and the only thing with Janet, she was like, hey, like, you can do anything you want, any videos, anything, but don't, like, mortgage my house. Like, that was, like, her one thing. Her one thing she wouldn't let me do. Yeah, I know. But, I mean, so it depends what kind of role you want to do, right? Unfortunately, a lot of, or like fellows or kind of intern level roles, I mean, there's not really a budget for it, you know? But for people that want to work full time, we were hiring like crazy at the state level, right? So anyone who could work full time and anyone who wanted to knock doors, they got paid something, you know? And there's actually, Ohio was the first state to recognize the Campaign Workers Union, you know, so that was, I mean, they had good benefits and whatnot. So actually, I mean, it depends from state to state and campaign to campaign. A lot of campaigns do run off of volunteer time, you know, and you can't, unfortunately don't have the resources to pay someone to do kind of 10 hours a week of door knocking and whatnot. And I mean, it was hard for us because there were campaigns that could afford to do that. The race next to us in the district over paid college students $500 a month to be like a fellow, you know, so we couldn't compete with that. We just didn't have the budget for it. We were already cutting our ad buys. So it is tough. It's really tough. And it's good to see, I mean, just internships. I mean, things like that the IOP does and funding those is great. What they're doing on the Hill to start funding those internships is great. Campaigns, I think just because they are so under-resourced and whatnot, we're really lucky here to actually get opportunities to do that. But there's ways to create money, I guess, especially starting up a campaign. And if you can make the case for the value that you bring, it's not hard to ask for a piece of that. I don't know if that really answers the question. I was kind of more rambling about campaign finances.
Matthew's sitting there, when he hears you say there's ways to create money, you say, there's a Democrat for you. Right there. So one of the things that the common elements of your stories is Matthew's is slightly different, but not that different, because you were an entrepreneur at this as a kid in school and working on campaigns. You created opportunities for yourself. But Brooke, talk about this notion of, and Ronan mentions it as well, kind of like just diving in and doing whatever needs to be done.
Yeah, I think that really is the key, and I will echo Zach's point about the IOP being an amazing resource. It was for me when I interned in the mayor's office in Chicago, and that was my first internship, and it was unpaid, but they were a great resource. So, but yeah, I think that, you know, once you find something that you like, you start it, and you got to just kind of be willing to do whatever, and it can be tough, but and from a financial standpoint, that's a little different than being willing to do any task. But yeah, you just need to sort of, I know for me, I never really knew what I wanted to do in most cases. Like, I would know I wanted to do a campaign, but I didn't necessarily know, okay, I want this role in particular. So just being really open when you're talking to people, and keeping in mind that a job may sound like something you're not interested at all, but then you could start doing it and it can turn out to be incredible, and then you build on it with the kinds of things you like to do. So really, I think if you want to do this kind of work, keeping an open mind and a good attitude is really, really important.
Matthew, I did a podcast about a year or two ago with Theo Epstein, who runs the baseball operations for the Cubs. And he was a student at Yale, and he applied to every baseball team, Major League Baseball team, and got an internship at the Baltimore Orioles. And he said that he figured out very quickly that there's about 20% of every job that no one wants to actually do. And if you make yourself available to do that 20% that the other people don't want to do, that A, you'll get a broad sampling of things, and B, you'll work your way up the organization. Is that true in campaigns as well?
That somebody who can come in and just be a catch-all is going to prove themselves very quickly, and then you're going to be offered your choice of tasks if you prove yourself competent. So I would say go in and just say, what can I do? And it probably will be menial at first. It may be unpaid. I would say it's likely going to be unpaid, but campaign is pure meritocracy, and people who are talented and work hard and show up every day will rise to the top very quickly and will prove themselves. And I think, when you do that on one campaign, for me, like it has been, I think for both of them, I think, the opportunities have just naturally followed, and the path has just been laid out if this is the business that you want to get into. So I think that once you put in that work and put in that effort, the rewards can be pretty great.
Anybody want to ask questions, just raise your hands, because yes, go ahead.
Brooke, so you worked at 2 different campaigns on a presidential race and a Senate race. Can you talk about the differences in your experiences between those 2 different levels?
Yeah, I think David and I were talking about this before. I think that the interesting thing about doing a presidential race as your first campaign is that it really skews how you think of campaigns, because it's this monster operation. Especially, I was in headquarters, so I was never out in the field, and especially in 2016, the experience I was having in Brooklyn was so different than even someone who was doing communications in Pennsylvania. So you really miss out on a lot of that, I think, at the presidential level, especially if you are not in the field. Whereas when I was in Missouri, I was traveling around the state all the time and just able to get a much better pulse of what was happening in different parts of the state, and you have a better grasp on everything that's going on in the campaign versus on a bigger scale.
Which was more fun?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's always, there's something about a presidential that feels so historic, and you just kind of wake up every day and it just feels kind of amazing. But at the same time, it's fun also when you rise up and you get more responsibility and you're not just sending people clips, you're thinking about strategy and that kind of thing. So that makes it fun. But they're different.
There are people here who I'm sure are thinking about getting involved in campaigns as between the 2, and I think this goes to your question. Which do you think is a richer sort of starting experience? And I mean, you guys had different starting experiences. You all did. Mm-hmm. But if you were counseling people,
I would say find the smallest or the most long shot campaign that you can, because if you're working on a well-funded congressional or a statewide race, I think some people think that there's more resume prestige in having that campaign name on your resume. But if I were to look at an operative's resume, you can have so many more opportunities and touch so many more areas of the campaign by working at a campaign that's under-resourced, or that might be a bit of a long shot, or that is for a city council or mayor's seat or something in the state legislature. That's where I'd want to start. Mm-hmm. And that's where I did. So.
Well, congratulations, you did it right.
There you go.
You got the longest of long shots. What about how much is kinship with the candidate important? Rather than the kind of mercenary idea.
Well, I will speak to that in that the campaigns that I have done, I haven't had a role where I was the go-to person for the candidate. Obviously not in 2016, and then last cycle I was
a lot of people ascribe the Clinton campaign to you. I mean, I just have to say.
Right, of course. But yeah, I think, and then last time around I was so focused on all of the opposition messaging that my role wasn't really to staff Senator McCaskill or anything like that. So I think that is just an experience. So for me, I'm thinking about next time, that's an experience I would like to have, and completing different.
And when you recruit, when you think about your next candidate, how much is it, I really like that person, I believe in that person?
I feel like that's the only way you can do it, especially if you're going to be spending time with that person. I think it's maybe a little bit different if you're just kind of looking for a really good first experience, but I think if you're going to be interacting with that person, you want to like them or believe in them.
I would think in communications, if you think someone's, kind of a dick, just to be blunt about it, that's harder than, you got to sort of believe in what you're doing.
Absolutely. I think, particularly with speech writing, but really in every facet of communications, you have to believe in what you're doing, and you have to have, to some degree, some sort of mind meld with the candidate and understand where they're coming from and how they communicate things, and that allows the process to flow so much better and just makes you better at anticipating things and really driving that message every single day.
How did you develop that mind meld with the governor?
It was a little more difficult. The first time around, the communications director on a campaign is going to have a much closer relationship, but when you have, the governor has
his own communications
fantastic communications team in his official office, and there's a clear distinction between the two. So it was a little bit harder and a little bit slower going, but Governor Ricketts is, I think, the best governor in the country, and he was incredibly...
You're going to go far in that organization.
Yeah. He's incredibly welcoming and accommodating and patient, and he really put the emphasis, which is probably unique among principals, on making sure that I understood if I did something that he wasn't particularly happy with, or the product wasn't quite where he wanted to see it, he made sure to walk me through.
How much time did you spend with him?
At the beginning of the campaign, not very much, and progressively more and more as he was more out on the road towards the end of the campaign. But staffing the governor at political events, and maybe that brings me to another point. If you want to get to know the candidate, drive the candidate.
Yeah.
We were fortunate that we didn't have to. The State Patrol covers most of the governor's transportation, but staffing can seem like a chore. It can seem like, I just don't want to go to that county Republican Party meeting that the principal is speaking at tonight. But I think being out on the road with them is really important, and even if you're not writing speeches or doing social media for a candidate, that one-on-one interaction is really valuable and can be very rewarding.
There are a lot of political careers that have actually been launched that way. Martin O'Malley, former governor of Maryland, started as a driver for Gary Hart when he was running for president in Iowa, and Chet Culver, now his father had been a senator, but he was a driver for Bonnie Campbell, who ran for governor of Iowa in '94, and he ended up being a governor, and part of it was developing these relationships and understanding of the state and understanding of the experience. I agree with you. I think that's a good gig. Yes.
I'm curious, given that you all came in with somewhat fresh perspectives, you kind of got a craft what the process looked like, but if there are things from an overarching process perspective on campaigns generally that you wish were not the case, that just could change process-wise, and obviously not I've got to go out and raise a bunch of money to fund what's going on, but overarching process or structurally.
Well, I mean, I think for working with a coordinated campaign is always difficult, right? So I mean, you talk about every state will have a coordinated campaign that works with all of the different races, all the congressionals, and ideally, in the best case scenario, your field is all run through your coordinated campaign. That's a nightmare, right? Because you have your message that you want to give out on your doors. Your targets might be different from Sherrod Brown's targets. Sherrod Brown's targets might be different from Rich Cordray's targets. We might want to talk to more moderate women. They might want to talk to less moderate. Everyone has different incentives and where they want their targets to be. So I think it just structurally, what's the most frustrating? That's probably the answer, because it's. I mean, the coordinated staff have conflicted. They're all in it for the right reasons. We're all on the same team, but the coordinated campaign has different goals than you do. So, and kind of deciding where you're going to build out your own field program, and it's hard, and trying not to step on each other's toes and whatnot. But especially in a state where there was governor's race, Senate race, 16 congressionals, it was a lot.
Yes.
So you all worked in comms in some respect. What do you think was the most effective form of messaging or message that you sent to the voters, although you had different audiences, of course?
You mean medium or specific
I'm actually
messaging?
speaking about the message itself, not so much.
Well, I think I think it's going to depend a lot, obviously, depending on the state and who your candidate is. For us, healthcare was a huge focal point. Basically, everything we did became about healthcare because Claire had done all of these town halls leading up to knowing she was going to run for re-election, and she had just heard about healthcare in every single part of the state she went to, and it was is and continues to be a huge thing that people feel every single day. So just informed by her experience and what we were hearing from other people, that became really what we were talking about.
This was a big theme, obviously, for Democrats across the country, particularly around the issue of pre-existing conditions. But and presumably you guys ran on that as well, or did you not?
Oh yeah, no, I mean certainly healthcare was a big part of it. And the conflict for us, we were a little unique because the comm shop in my head was two different equally important pieces, because one of it is national fundraising money, comms, talking to donors, raising money on people that hate Jim Jordan, right? You're not going to say the same thing to those people that you're going to say for paid in-district messaging, right? So talking about what we're going to put on TV, what we're going to put on mailers, whatever it is. So they're two completely different. But certainly the one is much more focused on, I mean, talking about healthcare is one of the biggest issues. But you also, when you're a challenger, you need to make the case for firing the incumbent, you know, so you need to find a way to do that. And it's hard. It's really hard to toe that line on staying focused on your message and hitting your messaging every week. But especially when you have two kind of sequence out that don't line up.
Was the healthcare issue an issue in obviously you had a Medicaid expansion amendment or initiative on the ballot in Nebraska, which ended up passing.
Yes.
Governor opposed it, I assume.
Yes.
But it didn't affect his race.
Didn't affect his race. I will say in places, you know, Nebraska's population is concentrated in the far eastern portion of the state. So in Lancaster and Douglas County, the two population centers in the state, it passed overwhelmingly. It only won in, I believe, 3 counties, Lincoln and Omaha, and then Sarpy County, a suburb of Omaha. And so support was very concentrated there, and in those counties, the governor actually ended up losing, which was a little bit surprising for us. But in state ledge races and in more local races in those areas, we did see the healthcare was an incredibly important issue.
Yeah, Ronan.
So I was wondering about, you're talking about the messaging to the people in your district. Were you guys able to commission polls or anything like that, or were you trying to find other ways of gleaning what was playing well in it? Or was R plus 14?
Yeah, we did polling. I mean, we did a full benchmark at the beginning, and then we did a poll at the end, and they weren't pretty. But we did do some issue testing, and we saw what moved people. And I mean, there were some things that were surprising me. I mean, one of our biggest movers in the poll was actually restrictions on gun rights to domestic violence abusers. Like, that was one that was like, oh, in this ARPA, really, that many people are more likely to support you if you support those. But that was an interesting one. So you'd see little things here and there. But we did do polling, and yeah, but it was obviously an uphill battle.
Yeah, you probably had ample research.
Yes, absolutely. But I will say that for smaller campaigns, you know, with advances in A/B testing and, you know, the lowered barriers to digital advertising and things, you know, it's possible to get results to kind of fine-tune a message. You know, I would never recommend going into a I would always want polling to inform my decisions and regular, you know, updates along the way. But I think that there are ways for smaller campaigns now to be able to get maybe a little bit more of an accurate
really good point.
view of where things are.
I don't want to I get my back to you guys, so. So let me return to the question I wanted to ask. Do you see your futures now in politics? Matthew, I'll leave you for last because I know you've sort of you're gone down path, and you've been at it since you were 5. So there's no mystery here. But you became involved in 2015. Where do you see the future now?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it becomes addicting. You sort of started, and nothing is quite as exciting as doing it. But I mean, I definitely plan to continue down this path. What that looks like exactly, I'm not quite sure. But I found kind of being open is the best way to find what's next, and just taking jobs that seem interesting. But definitely planning to stick with it.
Where did you study here?
Public policy.
So related.
Yeah.
And do you see yourself maybe being in government at some point?
At some point, yeah. I think that that's kind of always been a thought, and I think was a thought going into, or, you know, kind of towards the end of 2016, and that obviously went not quite as we had thought. But yeah, I think that would definitely be of interest, because the policy, there are some people who are not all that interested in the policy so much, kind of like the strategy a little more. I think it varies for people, but for me, I really like the policy component of it. And so I think that would be interesting.
You said it didn't, you I thought very artfully said it didn't go quite as we had thought in 2016. It's like, yeah.
Yeah.
But my question to both of you, and you had a different experience, how is it to devote yourself body and soul to to a campaign and come up short? Especially, you kind of expected it, you didn't expect it. That didn't knock the addiction. That wasn't like, you know,
yeah, in a way,
methadone.
No, I feel almost like I've got some unfinished business, I think, after the last two. But yeah, I mean, it's tough. You really do throw yourself into it, and you become very attached to the people you work with and the candidate, and yeah, a loss is always tough, but I think.
But you're ready to get back on the horse.
Yeah, at some point. I don't know about tomorrow, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're in it because you care. You know, when you lose, it's like, okay, well, what went wrong, right? And like, all right, what are we going to do to fix it? You know, that's the biggest thing. And I've been thinking a lot about the Democratic brand in Ohio, you know, and kind of is, like, and everyone's
not
speculating.
Not trading very high, other than Sherrod Brown.
Yeah, I mean, Ohio was a difficult year for Democrats. It was, it's hard because we all thought that our statewides were going to win. The polling had it. I mean, we didn't think that we would trail that far behind Sherrod Brown. So in a sense, I do feel like I thought we would win something, and I would tell myself we had a part to play in that, you know, turning out more voters in Ohio for, and a lot of it was part of the bigger picture. So even though we thought, okay, we knew this was a really long shot unless something crazy happened, but I wanted to be in Ohio because I wanted to also make sure Sherrod Brown got reelected. I wanted to elect more Democrats statewide, and I thought we were going to win that governor's race, and it definitely took the wind out of the sails. But since you care, I mean, you think about it, like why did we run 7 points behind Sherrod Brown? I fully believe that Rich Cordray lost because he's a Democrat, not because he ran a worse campaign or because he has a bad profile or wasn't an appealing candidate. I don't believe that. I think because he had a D next to his name, enough people were like, no, right? So that should raise questions and make us think about, okay, well, in Ohio, what can we do differently to make people not see that D next to their name and be like, oh, right, like, oh, I can't do that, you know? And that's a big, hard question, but like one that I think we need to continually be asking and be thinking about. And I'm definitely staying involved in Ohio politics, and I'll be taking a breather and not working 100-hour weeks for a little bit, working in DC, but definitely actively talking to people. I am doing some consulting work and kind of staying involved in Ohio politics, but you do it because you care, and you got to really ask those really hard questions about what went wrong and what can we do better, especially in a state like Ohio that I think we can and should win.
So you're just taking a respite. You're ready to get back on the horse as well.
I mean, we'll see. We'll see. It depends who runs. You know, I mean, I wouldn't throw myself on a presidential and put myself through that experience unless it was someone I really thought could win, right? And someone I really cared about and believed in. So, but
well, you like your own senator, right?
I do. We'll see.
Mm-hmm. But you see yourself maybe jumping on that one if he.
We'll see. I mean, I enjoy what I'm doing right now and want to give it a try. But
say what you are doing now.
So I'm working as a federal contractor through Ernst & Young's Government and Public Sector Advisory. So it's definitely a more normal 9-to-5 decent paycheck kind of thing. Yeah. So that's appealing, you know, and we'll see. I mean, it would be hard to turn down an opportunity to work on a race like Sherrod. I don't know that he could win the primary. I think it would be a really tough primary for him, but I think he's got the best chance to win in the general against Trump in a good economy. And I mean, we could argue about that all day, but that's probably another event.
Yeah. I'm sure we'll have some discussions about that.
Yeah.
Matthew, you're into it. This is your life.
Yes, sir.
Now, so talk a little bit about what you're doing now and what you think what your next couple of years are going to look like.
Sure. Well, right now I'm with
Axelrod. You have to get back on the horse.
Sure. I'll be excited to, actually. You know, right now I'm working with Axiom Strategies, which is one of the nation's largest Republican political consultancies now, working for Governor's brilliant political strategist Jessica Flanagan and Jeff Rowe is the CEO of the company. And I get to do a little bit of everything: direct mail copywriting, a little bit of kind of internal marketing for the firm, and communications for some of the public affairs clients, and even a little media production, which is great. But there's nothing quite like, for me, in comms, being an on-the-record spokesperson, and so I'll be excited to hopefully jump back into some campaigns and have my fingers in a more intimate way.
So you see yourself more as a campaign person than a consultant?
Right now, I think, ultimately, I do want to be a media consultant, and it's better pay. I think it's better lifestyle ultimately. But I think while you're young,
I had a full head of hair when I started. Just warning you.
But I think while you're young and don't have as many attachments and can afford to take some financial risks or take a lower paycheck, it's the time to go out there and have some fun.
Ronan, what about you? What do you see yourself doing? Graduating, I assume, is one of them.
I have to graduate and have to do that, so that I can do other things. But I definitely want to work on presidential in 2020. I'm very motivated by my feelings for the President of the United States. I won't specify in what direction, but I definitely want to work. I really want to work there, and I think I might try to get a head start on that this coming summer in Iowa. There's a thing here.
Yeah.
And I also have some friends that I made through the campaign. My boss is going to also probably be doing this, which is like the exciting thing, is that now I know all these people who are going to actually be hiring on these races, which is like definitely an opportunity that I would not have had access to had I not been on this race. But definitely politics are still beckoning. I also feel like there's a lot more work to do, and there's nothing like the high of being always at the ready to do very exciting things.
You were drawn to it by a particular issue.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the Illinois 6, what was unique is that healthcare was a big issue, but also we had a lot of candidates, even starting in the primary, talking about climate change and about the environment. A lot of these suburban voters were concerned about this as an issue, and Peter Roscoe, who's a representative at the time, was on the record calling climate change science junk science. And he had to pay the price for that. People were concerned about this issue. He wasn't meeting where they were at. And so Sean Casten, who ultimately went on to win, had been pursuing a career for decades as someone who was helping companies save energy and save money at the same time. So aligning the profit motive with environmental sustainability, which was awesome. It was great to be able to elect someone like that.
But he wasn't the candidate you supported originally.
That's correct. That's correct. I was with his opponent, Kelly Mazeski, who is also environmentally minded. And also,
was that a hard thing to do
yes.
to leave? I mean, they had a fairly competitive. There were a lot of candidates, but they were right at the top.
Yeah, they were at the top, and there was a little bit of there was a little bit of ill will, I would say, at the end of the race towards the Sean Casten campaign. So I felt like I was betraying all of my friends in the Mazeski campaign, and I had to make a bunch of phone calls to be reassured that this is something that is done. As long as you stick through to the end, it's not betraying anybody to hop on the general.
How was that received?
I actually had lunch with the Kelly campaign manager yesterday. They weren't upset about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's understandable that you're in this district. You want, a candidate. You want the party you're supporting this district to ultimately succeed. You want to get rid of Roscoe, was what we were talking about, and so our goals were aligned.
Do you were you involved in the Iowa project?
No.
4 years ago. So this Iowa project, you got cards here, is an opportunity to go to Iowa to work on a campaign of your choice, to work for a media organization in Iowa during the caucuses. We wanted to take advantage, we did this 4 years ago, of being in close proximity to the first contest in the nominating process. And I think if you talk to people who participated in it 4 years ago, it's a really enriching experience. Not monetarily, but in other ways. you know, I spent a lot of time in Iowa when I was working for President Obama, back when he was a candidate in 2008, a senator from Illinois, and I worked there in previous races and other iterations. It's a unique place because it's the only place on the primary calendar, arguably New Hampshire, but where candidates spend a great deal of time. And so if you work there, you're likely to be exposed to not just your candidate, but other candidates for president. And they're going to be exposed to voters in a way that they aren't at other stages of the presidential process. There's a lot of debate. We could probably get one in this room as to whether Iowa should have this preeminent place in our politics. I defend it because voters there take it very seriously, but it's a discrete, manageable state, and it does force candidates to interact with voters as you would if you were running for other offices. And you learn a lot about candidates, and it's an incredibly intense competition. There's a lot at stake, and so you know it's an energizing experience. So take these cards seriously and think it over. There'll be internships available this coming summer. I think stipends attached. Stipends attached. It's good. I would have felt bad if I told you that and that wasn't the case. But you know, you won't get these opportunities very often. So I urge you all to think about it. Are there people who would consider that, are interested in it? Cool. Good. You'll be hearing more about this. From time on, we're going to have fellows in the spring, in the winter, from Iowa, talking about this process. We're going to have a fellow in the spring who's expert on the Iowa caucuses. So there'll be a lot of focus on those caucuses, and it should be really interesting. Final messages from you guys to these guys about your experience.
Yeah, I mean, I would just encourage anyone who's thinking about a campaign to do it. It is the best post-college job because it kind of feels like a continuation of college.
Or they don't like college.
But it's all the good parts.
Oh, I see. It's like the best part of college is without the class.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, if you're thinking about it, you should do it. Reach out to you know, all the people who come through here. It's such a good resource. And yeah, can't recommend it highly enough.
And just to add to that, I agree with all of that, but don't assume that someone somewhere has it all figured out and like it's just you have to go through this, take risks, right? Like go in, work really hard, and just do something kind of out of the box and just see what happens. You know, like I think I couldn't have imagined a better experience, and just going somewhere, working really hard, and seeing what happened from it. And it wasn't the result we wanted, but just professionally, like the professional experience and the connections that I made doing that are going to last me a lifetime. So that was couldn't have asked for a better experience, and it was just taking a risk. So I encourage all you guys to do that.
I mean, I would say just don't be intimidated by the process or by the roles or the responsibilities that you might have because you may get them, you know, very early. I think there are some people who are true kind of savants at this business, and we happen to be sitting with one of them, I think. But most of us are just people who can exercise some good judgment and figure things out as we go along. And I know that each and every one of you as University of Chicago students are in that pool. So I encourage you to do it.
Let me just follow up with one thing. And this is maybe an unfair question, but you guys seem very directed. As you look down the road, if you could say, what is the dream job that you would like to do someday in politics, in government, in the public space, what would it be?
I'm honestly not totally sure. For me, I think that working for someone who, I mean, everyone I've worked for, I have thought really firmly believed in, and I think just, you know, if I'm still working for someone who I really firmly believe in and whenever you get to being in your dream job, I think that would be.
So you're not sure of the role yet?
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoy doing comms. I think it's really interesting, and I think I'll probably stick with it for a while. But yeah, I'm not tied into something in particular.
How's dealing with the reporters, by the way?
I like it. I think it's really fun. And that's something I did a ton of in Missouri, and you get to be friends with them because they're almost, when you're doing communications, they almost are your colleagues in a way that people on the campaign aren't, because you talk to them more than if you're talking to the finance team or whatever. So it's fun.
Yeah, I think that's not well understood.
Yeah.
It's not even sometimes well understood by candidates.
Yeah.
Who are like, why are you friends with these people?
It helps you be better.
Did you develop good relationships with your media there?
Absolutely. I think, there is a sense that it's more adversarial, particularly today, with the relationship that the White House has with the press. But really, our job is customer service. A lot of it is scheduling and answering very basic questions and just making sure that they get what they need to do their job. And at its best, it's a symbiotic and very positive relationship.
So anyway, I started you down a road, which is what your.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's funny because when you were answering it, my head immediately went to the same place. It's not the role; it's the person. And I don't know who that person is, but I mean, I'd love to help someone I really believed in do good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I think that's more what it comes down to. I think you found your person. We're still looking for ours.
Yeah, that was a lucky find. Yeah.
I'd love to have my own media consulting firm and someday do media on the presidential. Be a dream.
Yeah, it's good. It's a fun thing to do. Well, listen, I'm proud of you guys, and everybody. There are so many different ways to express oneself in the public space, and activism, and through NGOs, as policy advisors to people in public office, and every one of them is valid. But having come through the experience of 150 campaigns, everything you describe causes me to live my experiences vicariously through you again. And it's essential that that people invest their time and energies in this. There's a lot of cause for skepticism today, but everything that everybody here cares about, and you may have heard me say this before, the equities you care about are going to be affected by the outcome of these elections. Congress is going to meet with you or without you, legislatures, city councils, and they're going to do things that impact on the things you care about, whatever your political point of view is. So the idea that you can get in there and help influence those decisions by supporting people who have the capacity to help guide those debates is a pretty elemental, fundamental, and energizing role to play in our democracy. So I hope, if nothing else, what you take away from our discussion here is that it's a hell of a lot of fun, and it's important, and it's worth doing. And anything we can do to help facilitate those experiences, we want to do, including this Iowa project. We also have a mayoral race going on right now, and aldermanic races. So there's plenty of opportunities to engage in campaigns, and I hope that many of you do. So thank you, thank you,